Praise the Lord, everybody. Come on now. Praise the Lord, everybody. I'm, first of all, let me say to Dr. Wallace and his lovely wife, thank you for the opportunity you've given me today to be able to share with you. I'm so appreciative of this opportunity, and I struggled, however. Um, y'all a little too quiet for me. I almost feel like go ahead and just preaching and just saying, forget this piece that I got and just go ahead and preach. But I'm going to do what's assigned. But if preaching come out of me, it just come out of me. It was 2011. It was a young man by the name of Carlton Archer, who was a member of our church, 17 years old, who had got shot and killed. Carlton was different than the young men who typically have gotten shot and killed who have been a part of our congregation. Carlton was an AB student. He wasn't, so we thought, involved in gang activity. Carlton was a good student. Not only that, Carlton came from a two-parent household, unlike many of the kids in our block who come from single-parent households. 80% of the kids in our neighborhood come from single-parent households. And Carlton was different, so we thought. We later found out that he was participating in gang life, and as a result, he ended up getting shot and killed. I never shall forget, his mother came to me and she said, "Pastor, we can't have the funeral at the church." And I was so distraught. I was so hurt by that because I had been ministering to this family for years, and I wondered why all of a sudden we can't have a funeral here at the church, especially at that point in time. I had done 25 funerals for young black males who had been shot and killed. All of them had gone unsolved. She finally relented, and after telling me why she didn't want to have the funeral, she said, "I'm afraid that if we had the funeral here at the church, Pastor, that the kids coming 6 blocks over into our neighborhood of the church, that something is going to happen. Those kids are part of a different clique than the kids in this neighborhood 6 blocks." But I assured her nothing is going to happen. I promise you, let's have the funeral. She went ahead and relented. And on the day of the funeral, just as she said, the kids were walking 6 blocks. As they crossed King Drive, I'm in my office getting ready to come down for the sermon. I hear gunfire, semi-automatic gunfire. People were hollering and screaming and running, and it was chaotic just as you could imagine. But thankfully, no one was shot, no one was injured, no one was killed. We debated on should we go ahead and have the funeral or not, should we just let it go. But we went ahead and decided we're going to have this funeral, and we had the funeral. And at the end of the funeral, something happened to me that had never happened before. I said, I'm going to say a prayer, and at the end of this prayer, I want everybody who brought an illegal gun in to turn in your gun. The police were there. It was jammed, packed. And I said, I want you to bow your heads, and I want you to know that if you walk out this church and diss God with that illegal gun, then God is going to diss you. I said a prayer, and I said it with fervor. I said it with passion. I said it with an anointing that God had truly been in that room. And I thought it was going to be like those old Billy Graham revivals where he'd be in the stadium and he'd get an altar call and everybody just come down crying. And I thought it was going to be like that, but it wasn't. It was silent. It was quiet. No one said a word. All of a sudden, the young man stands up, locks, T-shirt, jeans, pulls up his T-shirt, and in the band of his pants, a 9mm Glock. Another one stands up, turns in a gun. Another one stands up, turns in a gun. At the end of the funeral, as we're walking out the door, the sergeant of police, with tears in her eyes, says to me, "Pastor, thank you so much. We found this gun underneath the seat." It was a 9mm gun with an extended clip. And in that moment, I thought, I've been in this neighborhood preaching the gospel, but it's apparent that I've not had as much impact as we should. And in that moment, I made a vow and a promise to God, whatever I needed to do and whatever I needed to say and whoever I needed to say it to, I was going to be all in. Up until that point, I had kept my conservatism my own business. I kept my politics my own business. I've been a conservative. I've been involved in politics, thinking-wise, since I was 19 years old. My undergraduate degree is political science from Ball State University. I've been a conservative, thinking person since I was 19 and a freshman in college. But up until this time, I had kept my politics my business, my conservatism my business. I made a vow to God, whatever you want me to say, whoever you want me to say it to, from this point on, God, I'm all in. Little did I know that God would take me up on that. How many know when you make a vow and a promise to God, he'll check and see if you're really serious or not. I walked about 100 feet outside of our church, and there was this hotel across the street. They had been involved in sex trafficking, drug sales. The gangs were using it. It was a den of iniquity. And I heard the voice of the Lord. I don't know how God deals with you, how God speaks to you. That's your business. I just know how God nudges me. And the nudge was simply go up on top of the roof of that motel and stay there until you raise enough money to bring attention and awareness to the violence on the south side of Chicago, and until you raise the money to purchase this building and tear it down and start trying to build a center. Make your voice known. Tell the world what's going on the south side of Chicago. I went up on top of that roof and I stayed there for 94 days. And while I was there, we created an organization called Project Hood. Hood stands for Helping Others Obtain Destiny. And while I was there, every day I would give thought to the different things that we're faced with in our community that is impacting life as we know it, as I know it, on the south side of Chicago. I started to address all kinds of issues. And from that thought, one of the issues that I want to talk about, even today when I received an invitation from Dr. Wallace, I thought, what could I leave, what could I deposit into a group of people as we try to journey our way through and find our path of conservatism in this country. And so I just want to talk about briefly identity politics the right way. Identity politics the right way. Whenever you hear about the south side of Chicago, you almost always know what's coming next, right? A story about guns and gangs and drugs and the desperation of poverty. When we make it on the news on the south side of Chicago, and we do quite often, it's usually always bad news. The church I pastor, New Beginnings Church, is at 66 and King Drive. We are one of the neighborhoods in Chicago with frequent shootings and gang violence, so much so that they call it O Block. It's named O Block after a young man named O.D. Perry who was shot and killed. The gangs took the O in his name and decided to start calling it O Block. Well, we decided to take the O back and we start calling it Opportunity Block. But on that block, when we make the news, it's always, most of the time, some bad news. There's a spate of shootings on the south side of Chicago. There's this gang on the south side of Chicago. There's these Venezuelans taking over apartments. Always some type of negative thing about the south side of Chicago. Daily life in our community, don't kid yourself, is hard. We've had pharmacies in our community close and not reopen. Right on 66 and King Drive, Walgreens decided they would shut their doors and not open. We've had people who are faced with difficulty of just getting their prescriptions filled daily. We have one poorly stocked grocery stores, and I want to remind some of you about some of these things because since y'all got moved out to the suburbs, y'all got forgot a little bit. So I got to let y'all know what's going on in the community. The pharmacy is closed and one poorly stocked grocery store. The food is not even worthy of giving to your dog sometimes. Our children are trapped in failing schools. One of our local schools in our neighborhood has a 6% reading proficiency, a 4% math proficiency. Add to that the extreme violence that these young people are seeing every single day. Every year I preach at several funerals for young men who have been killed, and I told you about the 25 shootings previously that went unsolved. Every day, all the time, there's chaos and murder. Just this past week, there was a mass shooting. You may have heard about it. 4 people shot on the Blue Line. Not even safe to ride the train anymore. That's the cold, hard truth of life in Chicago these days. Here's another truth for you. If gun control laws worked, Chicago would be the safest city in America. We have the strictest gun laws that the left could ever dream up. But guns are plentiful in Chicago, but only in the criminals' hands. Chicago schools are a disaster created by the left. Our kids can't read, can't do math, but they are learning something. You want to know what they're learning? They're learning to hate America. We'll talk about that more in just a few minutes. No list of complaints about the brokenness of Chicago would be complete without the mention of the left's war on police. Last year, my city cut the police budget by $63 million. In the middle of a crime surge. This was the left's brilliant idea: take away money from the police. Now this year we have to restore that funding, but the city has reduced the size of the police force. We have 1,343 fewer police officers today than we did in May of 2020. That's 1,343 fewer police officers to fight crime and protect our neighborhoods. There are consequences to these crazy leftist ideas. People are no longer putting up with these ideas in our broken city. Some of you may have seen the news, I'm sure, of the billionaire investor Ken Griffin, how he's leaving Chicago and he's going to Miami. Mr. Griffin made the following comments about the skyrocketing crime in Chicago. Listen to what he says. He says, if people aren't safe here, they're not going to live here. I've had multiple colleagues mugged at gunpoint. I've had colleagues stabbed on the way to work. Countless issues of burglary, end quote. And he's not the only one leaving Chicago. According to a new study from the University of Illinois at Chicago, Chicago is now the slowest growing major city in the U.S. since its peak in 1950. Chicago has lost nearly 1 million residents. Another sign that our city is in decline is property prices and tax prices. Some of you ought to be able to relate to that. Property prices are going up and taxes are going up. Here's a recent headline from Chicago's Crane Business Magazine. They said this, quote, Chicago home prices are going down while other cities are going up. Chicago's home prices are going down, but the taxes are continually going up, up, up. Our nation has rampant inflation, but housing prices are falling in Chicago. Isn't it a wonder? If your city completely bottoms out and is drained of its productive workforce, prices will eventually fall. We are seeing that in our real estate market in Chicago. But our purpose here is not to look at some the many failures of Chicago, because if we looked at the many failures of Chicago, that would take all day. Instead, I want to point out this because Chicago is instructive for us. Chicago has not had a conservative or a Republican mayor since 1931. Think about that for a moment. The city has been controlled unilaterally by Democrats for generations, and oftentimes black Democrats. Chicago gives us a chance to see the consequences of unbridled leftism. That is what happens when there are no conservatives in office to counteract the worst instincts of the left. We hear so much from the left about identity politics today. The left is obsessed with buzzwords about identity. But have you noticed how the left does identity politics? The left uses not just labels to create identities rooted in victimhood, always using the language of oppression. Ask a liberal why Chicago is failing, and you will hear different explanations, all rooted in systems of oppression. This worldview that sees oppression everywhere is based on the false and destructive identities. What are they? I'm glad you asked me. The first destructive identity that the left has given us is that we are on our own. Our identity as someone's child does not matter. Our identity as parents does not matter. And of course, our identity as children of God is irrelevant and derided by the left. If you show me a boy on the south side of Chicago who has a dad present in his home and present in his life, and a boy who never met his father, I can tell you immediately, and so could you, which child is more likely to struggle in school? Which child is more likely to experiment with drugs? Which child is more likely to wind up in a gang? This isn't rocket science. The left spends so much time and taxpayer funding to try to analyze risk factors of gangs, all while telling us that fathers don't matter. Let's be clear. We all know successful people who have grown up without fathers. I'm one. And the moms who help those children grow into the men and women God called them to be should be thanked profusely. But those are the exceptions. And the path is fraught with difficulties. Fathers matter in the hood. And fatherhood matters in the hood. And our identity, not just as one man's child, but as God's child, can keep us out of a lifetime of hurt and definitely out of a lifetime of pain. The left has told us for far too long that fathers can be replaced with government programs. The simple reality is that they cannot be replaced, never can be replaced. This is the worst of identity politics, because this war on fatherhood, both earthly and heavenly, has devastating consequences. Identity matters, and our identity as God's children who are fiercely loved by God is the absolute most important identity anyone could ever have. And then there's another false identity pushed by the left. That's the lie that we have no common identity as Americans in this country. The left prefers this divisiveness of identity politics. This is why the 1619 Project has set off such a firestorm in recent years. Now, you might not be tempted to think that sounds like a small deal. That somebody say that's a classroom issue. It's a curriculum issue. Let's be clear about something. No individual can take part in the American dream or the American experience of individual liberty and personal responsibility if he has been indoctrinated by these dangerous ideologies and told to believe that the American dream applies to everybody but them because of the color of their skin. Our schools today are going down a terrifying path. They're teaching children to hate America. I see it every day. Children are being taught to hate America, to view themselves as victims, to think of our nation's beautiful founding as some kind of act of racism. And don't miss this, to think that the American dream just does not apply to them. That's why the left is obsessed with teaching kids a concocted New York Times history of 1619. The story of 1776 is the real story. And that's what we should be teaching our children if we want them to grow up and to be able to participate in the American dream. And third and final, there is this issue of our identity that comes from our work. That our work does not necessarily have to be outside the home or even paid. There's plenty of God-ordained work that does not come with a paycheck. I know that's right. But idleness is not part of God's plan for us. Increasingly, though, it is part of the left's plan. The left has confused understanding of the benefits of work with reducing the value of a job to just a paycheck. That's why for the left, a welfare check is an adequate replacement for a job. In the left's framework, money in from welfare or a welfare check is just as good as money in the form of a paycheck. But welfare checks are about one thing, and one thing only: survival. Jobs provide much more than mere survival. Work gives us a sense of purpose, a reason to wake up in the morning, a sense of dignity. And there is no replacement for a child who sees his or her mother or her parents going off to work to provide for the family. The program my church runs is called Project Hood. It stands for Helping Others Attain Destiny. At Project Hood, we have a mission to help individuals achieve great things and obtain hope for a future. We offer things like job training, resume writing. We connect people with jobs that lead to a fulfilling career. We help men who come out of violent gangs say goodbye to that lifestyle and usher in a new phase of life. We partner with major corporations that come in and provide all the training someone needs to get started to go down a brand new career path. We have restaurants to come in and help teach culinary art skills and food skills. We partner with some of the largest construction companies in the nation to help teach people to put down a gun and pick up a hammer. We have landscaping and electrical programs. These are not just paychecks. These are career paths that excite people. We have too many success stories of turnaround lives to count, but I just want to share a few of them with you before I leave today. One of my favorites, a young man who came out of a gang, wanted a chance at a new life. He attended one of our job training programs in construction. As part of training, the partner company that we partner with gave each student a pair of work boots. These are necessary for the tools of construction. Well, this young man, Alfred is his name, was so overcome with emotion when he got these work boots. You see, those boots were not just a pair of footwear for him. They were an affirmation that someone cared, that someone believed in him and his ability to work in construction, regardless of how many years he spent in prison. I'm proud to tell you that Alfred took those work boots and got right to work. The last 6 years of his life have been blessed years. Alfred now works for a major construction company. And just a few months ago, I was so grateful to not just do his wedding, but to experience him buying his first home. Project Hood inspired him. Jobs have the ability to transform lives. Here's another story. Several years ago, there was a knock at my door, on my church door. A man in his 50s, heading into his 60s, wanted to talk to me. He told me his name was Cedric Scales. He had spent the last 25 years of his life in jail. He had missed out on seeing his children grow up. He had missed out on life, and it showed. He was beleaguered. He was torn. He didn't ask for a handout. You know what he asked for? A job. We chatted for a bit, and he didn't have particular skills or experience, but he was earnest. So I said, you know what, Cedric? I have a job for you. It isn't glamorous, but it's an important job. If you do well with this, we can talk further. He waited to hear my offer, and I told him, we're in need, Cedric, of a janitor. We need someone to come every day to sweep and mop and clean the bathrooms, the lobby, everything immaculate, even the toilets, everything must be clean. And at this point, I fully expected him to say, after I tried to make it seem like it was a dirty, nasty job, I expected him to say, no, Pastor, that was not what I was looking for. But with a smile on his face, he said, when do I start? That job has changed his life. Listen, one of the things that we have to do as conservatives, we talk a good game. We got some of the greatest minds and the greatest thinkers. But until our minds and our thinkings reaches into the neighborhood, nothing is going to ever change. Until people see you in the neighborhood where the real work is, we can be intellectual all day, and I love intellectuals. I'm not one, but I love hanging out with them and listening to them. I can't argue with them. I just love getting their arguments and taking them and using them and making it look like it's mine. But we've got to get in and roll up our sleeves. We got to start doing the work. We got to start showing that conservative principles and conservative values, they'll work if you work them. And when you do that, Alfred Creamers of the world, the Cedric Scales of the world, the Rafis of the world, their lives will be forever changed. So I want to ask you conservatives to come out of the closet. Get back into the neighborhoods and start getting involved in the lives of our people. Because if we don't, not only are they going to go to hell, but they're going to continue to be impoverished, they're going to continue to be uneducated, and they're going to continue to be fatherless. But we have the answers. And with those answers, we can change not just Chicago, but every urban area across America when conservatives stand up and do their part. God bless you. God bless America. And God bless black conservatives.